You know, we've all heard the saying, it's not life or death, right? It's not life or death whether you get this assignment done. It's not life. What happens if it is life or death? How long did that introduction take?
You talking was 2:20.
Okay, so 5 minutes total. In that 5 minutes, 9 children under the age of 5 died from waterborne diseases. It's not right. It's not fair. It has to change, right? And with leaders like Gary White, it will change. Please welcome the founder of water.org, Gary White. Welcome to USC. Thanks for being here. Have a seat.
All right.
Such a honor to welcome you to USC. Gary flew out here with colleagues from water.org, and at their expense, which makes me feel even worse, but no, we'll make sure that we correct that. But thank you so much for being here.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
How often do you get out to LA?
You know, more frequently now. It seems like about every month or so. I'm out this way for a few days.
Okay. Well, we'll make sure that we're on your schedule from here on out, and you make a regular appearance at USC. We showed the video, which gives a great overview of the organization. Can you, before we sort of dive into it, can you sort of give us the scope of water.org and your mission?
Well, the scope of the problem is immense. I mean, you saw that in the videotape, and it's one of those immense social challenges that the planet faces, and yet it's completely solvable. And so, from water.org's perspective, the scope of it is immense, and we're still a relatively small NGO. And so when you look at those two things together, you have to figure out how are you going to be really smart and entrepreneurial in terms of how you tackle the problem. And I've been doing this basically focused on water since I was an undergrad. And right out of the gate, I thought that the solution was really focused on drilling more wells. As an engineer, you're predisposed to thinking of kind of going out and directly solving the problem. And so the scope of water.org initially was just that, trying to do it better and more efficiently, but it was that. And now we recognize that to get the leverage to connect the dots between what we do and that vision of safe water and sanitation for all in our lifetime, the scope has to change. And it has to be more about leveraging these natural forces that are out there, like the market, like the base of the pyramid that has tremendous purchasing power, and how do we kind of bend or kind of nudge these systems that are out there, like the free market, capitalism, and customers, to be able to tilt the playing field a little bit more in their favor, so that they can get access to water and sanitation and be able to afford to pay for it in the majority of cases.
Was your water credit philosophy, was that influenced by microloans and Muhammad Yunus and Kiva?
So it was definitely influenced by Muhammad Yunus, and really the roots of it kind of predate Kiva. And so I think that was a critical insight on our part, that we realized that the poor were already paying huge amounts of their income for water, in some cases 25% of their income to secure water. We knew that they were going to loan sharks to take out loans, sometimes 125% interest rates, so that they could build a toilet. So the fact was that the poor were kind of shut out of the more traditional ways of obtaining water, particularly in urban areas where you would have a private household connection. Once you got a connection to the utility, the price you pay for water is a pittance compared to if you had to go out and scavenge for water or buy water from what's known as the water mafia, because you're paying about 7 to 10 to 15 times, sometimes more, per liter of water to get it from those informal vendors versus getting a water connection in your home. And so we realized that these folks, if you could help them get access to microfinance, then they would be much better off, because they could pay that connection fee of about $100 to get connected to the utility, and then their monthly payments would go down. And so we saw microfinance institutions as a perfect channel to be able to leverage to make that happen.
Great. And so give us an overview of where water.org is working in the world today.
So working in Honduras, in Haiti, working in Kenya, Ethiopia, Ghana, Uganda, India, Bangladesh, and Indonesia. I don't think I've missed any there. And a lot of those programs are expanding. We're just expanding into South America with Peru as well. And a lot of those programs are focused on water credit.
You on a plane a lot?
Yes, a lot. I'm traveling probably about 40% of the time right now, and I go from here to St. Louis tomorrow for the Clinton Global Initiative University and panel there, and then fly over to Oxford for the Skoll World Forum on Social Entrepreneurship, and then bounce around Europe for a little while and come back for the weekend and go to Lima. So
there aren't many places besides Haiti that are sort of close. They're all long
Yeah.
hauls where you're working, so you must cover a lot of miles. So put it in perspective for the class. And by the way, very international class. This is the most diverse international school in the country, so there are people from all over the world here. But put it in perspective of what it means to us. How does this global crisis affect all of us? And why should we move?
yeah, it affects us globally because we are all human. We all need water to survive. And it's not like we don't understand that. And so it should just really shake all of us to the core that we live on this planet where we can get water at the turn of the tap, and yet there's people dying by the millions every year simply because we can't apply the solutions that are out there. So imagine, if we found the cure for AIDS today, and 100 years from now, there were still 3.5 million people dying from that, that would just be considered unthinkable. And yet that's kind of the situation that we have with water and sanitation and water-related disease. Imagine having your 6-month-old baby die from dehydration just because she had diarrhea. Right? Dying from diarrhea in this day and age, it doesn't seem possible. And so there's that human element of it that should affect us all. But then water and water crises around the world are inherently local. And so, here in Southern California, we experience, water shortages here in this country, but we can cope with them. But in other regions of the world, it's just much harder to cope because you have poverty overlaid with water scarcity, overlaid with growing populations. And so it doesn't affect us in that really direct way here, but it will continue to affect us as those populations around the world aren't able to meet their water supply needs, as well as how that can turn into violence and war and other things that can start to affect us more directly.
Sure. And then that's without even really talking about productivity in terms of output and what the difference it would make in their lives and collectively to society. If people weren't spending half their day walking to get water, they could actually be at work and creating an income and all those other things they could do with money. So the series is primarily about entrepreneurship, but also creating a framework for applying things to your life. So we always like to get context of where people's path and why you chose this path of being a mission-based entrepreneur. You're going to hear this, and you'll hear the ways that he attacks the problem and evaluates opportunity, and it's the exact same way as someone does it for profit. It's just that instead of taking all the chips and pulling them into his lap or his company's lap, he's distributing it and paying it forward. So you're going to hear a lot of the same lessons and stories of other entrepreneurs. So we just want to cover your background and family a little bit before we sort of shift forward. So where were you born? Where did you grow up?
So I was born in Kansas City and grew up there, went to school in Kansas City, and then went to a public university, Missouri, S&T.
Okay. How big of a family?
So there were 5 of us kids, and it was kind of the quintessential, childhood growing up in the early 70s. Neighborhood full of kids, always kind of out in the woods, building tree houses, and goofing off, and had a great childhood. That I didn't really feel like it was particularly special or anything. Everybody around us was kind of the same, you know.
Yeah, Midwestern
So,
upbringing.
yeah.
And what did your parents do for work?
So my father was a telephone man. So he, you know, very much a blue collar worker, climbed telephone poles, you know, every day, installing phones, you know, summer, winter. And my mom was a stay-at-home mom until us kids kind of got up to high school age, and then she went to work at the credit union in the school cafeteria. So she was always close by as well.
And what were some of the sort of early influences on you, and what may have put you on a path of service being an important part of your life?
I think that it really came from a couple of different sources. One was my family and my parents and my mom in particular, who really was this quintessential example of living your life for others. And for her, that largely meant her family, and her focus was on us kids and helping us grow up. But it also was a tremendous example of her volunteerism in the church, in the community, and just the way that you know, she felt she should be contributing to that. And then going on, I went to a Christian Brothers High School in Kansas City, and that was a tremendous influence on me too, because of that solidarity with the poor, that taking religion beyond religion and converting it into social justice, and really making sure that you're doing something to make the world a better place. And I think those things, that's kind of what I went off to college with, was kind of that background and that desire to figure out how to, you know, what I've heard called, you know, finding the intersection of the world's greatest need and your greatest passion. And that's when I discovered water when I was in an undergrad.
In college. So where did you go to college?
So it was Missouri Science and Technology now, then it was the University of Missouri-Rolla. It was kind of the basic engineering campus for the University of Missouri system.
And what did you major in, starting major, and when did you switch?
Well, I started in aerospace engineering, and then kind of recognized that it wasn't quite as people-related as what I was hoping to do, and it didn't really quite seem to fit as much with kind of that social justice mission, and then discovered civil and environmental engineering and switched my major then. And that's when I discovered how, you know, through that discovered how big this water crisis was as part of a trip that I took as an undergrad to volunteer in Guatemala.
In Guatemala. And so you completed your undergrad and stayed there for your grad work?
Yeah.
And you did your master's thesis on?
On a rural water supply system on this tiny island in the Philippines, where we did some research on the island. We helped the people there to construct a rainwater harvesting and storage system, because their island was so small. It was about 1 square mile. Every time they tried to dig a well, they would get salt water. And so the only solution there really was the rainwater. And that kind of goes to kind of where my mind was at that time. That was very much a direct, I often tell people, you know, that's the only water project I ever built in my life, was when I was working on my master's degree, even though I'm the co-founder of water.org. But I think you go through that journey, and you do roll up your sleeves, and you kind of, you know, just immerse yourself in it, not knowing, I mean, if you kind of wait around until you have like the perfect solution, the perfect way to kind of do this or help the world, then you're going to be, you know, waiting forever. I love that saying that, you know, life's what happens while you're busy making plans. So sometimes you just got to jump in and get started.
That's, I mean, if you do wait, and being a perfectionist is not a great attribute for an entrepreneur, because you'll just sort of wait and analyze and take too long. What was your first job out of college, and with what organization? What'd you do?
So I had a great first job out of college. My wife and I moved to New York, and I was accepted at NYU to do a master's in public administration, because I thought that's what I was going to need to go with the engineering to land my dream job. And I dropped off a copy of my thesis at Catholic Relief Services in New York. At that time, they were the largest private relief and development agency in the world, or working in the United States anyway, focused on the developing world. And it just so happened I lined up with the position they were trying to hire. So right there, I was able to land this position where I was overseeing all of the water and sanitation programs for Latin America and the Caribbean, which was a great first job to have out of school. And it allowed me to learn tremendously more about the crisis.
And from that, is that when you shifted and pivoted to consulting for a bit?
Yeah, so are there any engineers in the crowd tonight? So,
Couple.
okay,
Don't be ashamed.
So, yeah, for engineering, to get a professional engineer's license, you have to take an initial exam, and then you have to work for 5 years in a practical experience, and then you have to sit for a final exam. And I lacked that experience, and because of the way Catholic Relief Services was restructuring, I had to kind of go out into the consulting engineering world for just long enough to sit for the exam. And I was incredibly frustrated by the job that I had to do. And fortunately, I was able to get back into developing world issues after that.
So more of a means to an end for you than?
Yeah, it was. And I didn't know how poor of a fit it might be when I went into it, but it was just to kind of go from one day be in the highlands of Guatemala and helping extremely poor people get safe water, and then the next day of the job, it wasn't literally the next day, but right soon after that, to be designing a sewer pipe that went from point A to point B in Pueblo, Colorado. It was just a real mind-blowing experience for me, and I didn't last long.
But it's early in your career, and it's not a bad thing to cross things off your list to know that you don't want to do them, right?
Yeah.
So you knew for sure you didn't want to be a consultant.
Mm-hmm.
And so in 1990, sort of the beginning of Water Partners at the time, can you share the story of why accepting a dinner invitation to your house could be an expensive proposition? Talk us about sort of the beginnings and what that dinner was about.
Mm-hmm. So I think from your reading up, you were probably talking about that first fundraising dinner that we did. Yeah. So when I was in the consulting engineering job, I was trying to kind of maintain my sanity and maintain the connection to this type of work. So basically invited family and friends to come to this Thanksgiving dinner, which was the day after Thanksgiving in 1990. And just sent out a letter saying I wanted to raise funds for this community, El Limon in Honduras, that needed a water system. And that dinner, we raised about $4,300. About 100 people showed up, and that really was the initial foundation for Water Partners. And then it's grown ever since that. And so those first few years were all about these fundraising dinners, because we didn't have any startup grant. We didn't have any angel investor. All we had was some passion and kind of a soapbox, and that's the only way we knew to raise funds, was to throw a fundraiser. And it just kind of evolved from that. And
you raised over $4,000, and what did you do with it?
So we used it for this community in Honduras. As I mentioned, I was working for Catholic Relief Services prior to that, so I had a chance to get around the world to see where some of the greatest projects were, and I knew the Honduras program was outstanding. And so we basically funded that through Catholic Relief Services. I went and visited the community, took pictures, got the stories, and then came back, and we had a Thanksgiving dinner the following year where we raised more money, and I was then able to kind of tell the story of the community and the progress on the system. So it started off as a very kind of high-touch grassroots effort to kind of build the revenue.
So in your experience with Catholic Relief Services and your engineering experience and what you've seen in the world so far, what did you see in water projects and programs that you thought you could do better?
Yeah. So basically at that time, about half the water projects that were getting built in developing countries were no longer working. And that was for a variety of reasons. Sometimes it was just, purely bad technical design. For instance, I remember traveling to the Dominican Republic when I was with Catholic Relief Services, and some local engineers, or not even engineers, I don't know who they were, but they came up with a pump design that was very low cost, very admirable, kind of approach to try to drive the cost down in these shallow wells. And it's basically some PVC pipe, one that was fitting inside of another, and it would displace the water. It would pump out through this little spigot. But what was happening was that the water would come up, and this piece on the top had broken, and it would splash over their hands, and it would run back down into the well. And so I was actually there doing water quality testing, and the quality of the water in the river that was flowing by this community was actually better than the quality of the water coming from the wells. So you have situations like that where you just don't have the technical competence, but you also have situations where it was very much a top-down supply-driven approach where, we're the NGO, we're here to help you get water, and you drill the well, and you go away. And once it breaks down, there's no training there in place to help people maintain it. There's no financial infrastructure in the form of people paying a small fee to use the water so it can be maintained. So for a variety of reasons, water projects were failing at a huge rate. And so what we wanted to do differently is kind of apply more of an analytical approach to it, where the engineering in me probably comes out, is like what correlates with sustainable projects? What correlates with projects that fail? Let's take this apart a bit and let's see if we can build best practices around that. And so what we did was basically go find those NGOs in the developing world who displayed the best practices, and we evaluated them, certified them, and then we would provide them funding to kind of go out and do more of what they do. So again, the philosophy was never that we're not going to be a bunch of engineers flying around the world doing water projects, because that expertise is resident within those countries and within the technical folks there. And so that was really the model from the start. Let's find the best of the best. Let's get more support behind them. Let's monitor and evaluate those. We have continued that kind of approach, partnership approach, even into water credit with microfinance institutions now.
So you thought, you saw what was not working, you saw there was a problem that needed addressing, you figured you guys could probably do better starting from an organization than trying to revamp an existing one, so you started one. Like any good entrepreneur, like any entrepreneur, not necessarily good or, it was tough at first. What was your starting monthly salary once you finally paid yourself?
So after working full time for a little bit for nothing, then it was $100 a month. That was
$100 a month?
Yeah, that was the first salary. So.
Are you living in the U.S.?
I was, and fortunately, I had a kind of a scholarship with my wife, who was very patient and gracious, who covered our living expenses in the early days, so that I could indulge this.
That's a good partnership.
So,
and as Water Partners evolved and grew, where did your sources of funding come from?
So initially it was all at the grassroots level, and then because we were engineers that were kind of running the organization, we were able to bring in some engineering firms to support, particularly underwriting the cost of these fundraising dinners that we were still doing. But then we started to at that time, even pre-internet, pulling the foundation directory off the shelf at the library, to see all the different foundations that are out there and who might support this. And very few foundations, in 1990 were supporting water projects. And so, but we just dug through that and sent out a lot of letters, and we started to get some hits and started to get some attention. One of the initial grants for $100,000 was from the Michael and Susan Dell Foundation that helped us launch water credit in India. And so it started off with kind of those small, usually foundations, but sometimes individuals. I remember even before that, getting a $25,000 check one time, and it just blew me away, that somebody would give us that much money. And so now, fast forward to this year, our revenue this year will be about $13 million. So it's evolved quite a bit.
So it's not an easy path for an entrepreneur, whether it's profit or nonprofit. I'm sure that was a long, tough slog for 19 years. Let's talk about maybe some of the challenges of having that model where you're out raising money constantly. Can you talk about some of the low points or some of the real challenges in raising money?
In terms of the low points in raising money, I think we were pretty good at keeping our expenses in line with our revenue and projecting that. And I remember when we were at about a budget of about $400,000, we had one of our largest donors. It was actually, and I can understand it, not if the singer Jewel, but she had an organization called the Clearwater Project that was focused on water in developing countries, and we had a multi-year commitment for them for a few $100,000, and 2 years into it, they weren't able to make the payment because the record industry tanked, and so all of a sudden we had a fourth of our budget that year just kind of disappear, and that was a huge blow. And by this time we'd had quite a few people around the country supporting us in different levels. And so I loaded up the station wagon with clothes and food and started driving around the country, stopping in different cities, reaching out ahead of time to people to see if they would meet with me, to see if they would provide us some support to kind of make up the difference. So that was a low point for me, trying to make up that revenue deficit. But then it actually, by the time I made it to San Francisco, that's where I bumped into what would become a really strong angel donor for us that really helped us through.
So it does sound very similar. You're losing 25% of your business.
Mm-hmm.
That banks will talk about this, your investors will talk about it. You don't want to have heavy concentrations of one customer, mm-hmm. one donor. But what's your alternative? To turn it down? You don't turn down the money, right? You take it, but that's the risk of having someone renege or can't fulfill their commitment. I just get this image of Gary, once that news comes and facing sort of what must be cutbacks and layoffs and all those things. You're a little bit young, but remember, you ever see Forrest Gump? One day I just went out running. Yeah, I just picture him getting in the wagon, just like no place to go, but just starts driving and meeting with anybody. But it does underscore your belief in this, that you weren't going to fold up, you weren't going to quit, and you did whatever it took.
Yeah, and I think that I don't know if it's what it is, but for me, there was just something in me that every time there was adversity, you just redouble your effort. There's not, I just remember so many nights, just staying up, till 3, 4 in the morning, all night sometimes, because we needed that next grant, and just spending hours with that grant proposal just to make sure that it's just right. And so I think that, I probably spent, 80% of the effort kind of getting the last 10% of the polish on it, but I wasn't willing to give up that 10% reduction in probability, right, of getting the grant. And so that's kind of the extreme that we would go to make sure that when the chips were down, we worked harder, because it's a bit trite, but I mean, you really feel like if you know this problem, this issue, and you've met the people firsthand who are relying on that next disbursement to get the project finished, your life is nothing in terms of degree of difficulty compared to theirs. It just doesn't compare. So how can you not step up and make it happen?
Yeah, that's very true. So before we shift to sort of the reincarnation or the merger, can you tell us, for the 19 years that you were water partners, approximately how many projects did you complete, and how many people did you sort of impact at that point?
So from starting in 1990 up until probably about 4 or 5 years ago, we probably had less than 100 projects, and by that point we'd probably impacted probably 400,000 people or so with access to water and sanitation. So that was kind of where we were, like I said, about 5 or 6 years ago.
It still is sort of a stupefying number to think about that. It's not hundreds, it's not even thousands, it's hundreds of thousands of people whose lives are changed because of what you do. So let's talk about 2009 and how you connect with H2O Africa and how that relationship evolves and you become water.org.
So yeah, 2009 was the merger. So a couple of years prior to that, I got a call from the alumni magazine at University of North Carolina, and they wanted to do a story on water and water.org, at that time Water Partners. And the writer said, oh, by the way, you should also talk to this other guy, Charlie Engel, who's an alum who just ran across the Sahara Desert, and he's doing something with water. And so as it turns out that Matt Damon and Ben Affleck and their company, production company, was doing this movie called Running the Sahara. And when these 3 ultra athletes ran all the way across Africa through the Sahara Desert, they obviously were hit in the face with the water crisis. And so they, Matt and the other producers and some of the runners started H2O Africa as a foundation to respond to that. And they were pretty successful at drawing attention to it and raising funds. And then, they needed to figure out how to get that water, how to get those funds out there to support water projects. And so I remember I called Charlie and said, hey, I'm going to be near Greensboro where he lived, and I'd like to come up and talk to him about H2O Africa. And he said, sure, come on up. And slept on his couch that night and figured out that there probably could be a partnership. And that trust that was built with Charlie and the others in the organization really led to them putting their funding through us to go out and get these projects done because of the vetting process that we had, the partner network that we had. They saw the value in not kind of reinventing that wheel. And as we worked more with them, and Matt and I got to know each other, we began to have conversations about, do we really need two separate organizations? Can we just kind of roll this up into one? And I thought that was a great idea. He did too. We worked with our boards to kind of bring them along on that. And then in 2009, we decided to merge the organizations. And that's when we rebranded as water.org. So we had the water.org URL since, the birth of URLs.
Good one to have, by the way.
Yeah, we had to pay $7.95 to secure that.
I wonder what you listed on your balance sheet now. It's worth a lot of money. So talk about the relationship with Matt and how that's evolved from being sort of founders of two organizations coming together and working together, and how your philosophies aligned.
Yeah. Well, with Matt, he's an incredibly gifted actor, as everybody knows, but he's also an incredible person and an incredibly smart person, and very committed to the poor and to water. And so what he's done is kind of transcend kind of the typical celebrity support of causes. And I don't take anything away from celebrities that kind of do show up at the gala, the fundraiser, or kind of act as a spokesperson. I think that's great that happens. But he really has signed on at a strategic level as a co-founder and works on the strategy. And we just had an op-ed published together a few weeks ago for World Water Day in the Daily Beast. And he participates in the strategy sessions. He travels to the countries with me. And sees the work firsthand. So you couldn't ask for a better co-founder, and the fact that he's a celebrity and has the potential to tell the story to a wider audience is huge, and it really adds to that. And he's been very gracious with his time. As I tell everybody, he has a day job, and he's raising 4 daughters with his wife Lucy. So he's got a lot on his plate, and yet he still carves out the time to contribute at all levels.
Yeah, he also knows the issues. He's not sort of just showing up, like you said. So you mentioned the advantages of having someone that well-known and visible, the ability to attract attention, to attract funds. I'm sure you use his time efficiently. There probably aren't many people who can do a satire video and in less than a couple weeks 1 million views, and then get his friends to go do it and join it as well. So that it is a unique thing that he brings to the table. Let's do
we have the strike?
Okay. So let's see Matt's latest creation for water.org.
Morning, everybody. Well, I'd like to start the press conference today by asking all of you a question. November 19th was World Toilet Day. How did you celebrate it? You.
Sorry, World Toilet Day? I mean, is that even a real thing?
Yeah, of course that's a real thing. November 19th, World Toilet Day. How'd you celebrate it?
I don't know. I guess I used a toilet or, Come on, man, it's World Toilet Day. It's like a joke.
Oh, really? Anybody have any idea what invention has saved more lives than any other in the history of humankind? The toilet. Yeah, I'm not at all surprised that you gasped.
We didn't gasp.
I mean, what's even more shocking is the catastrophic worldwide lack of clean water and sanitation. 780 million people, that's twice the population of the United States, lack access to clean water. 2.5 billion people lack access to a toilet or basic sanitation. I mean, more people have cell phones than have toilets. For $25, you can give somebody clean water for life. $25. I mean, sir, how much is the bottle of water you're drinking? How much did that cost?
I shoplifted this.
And so in protest of this global tragedy. Until this issue is resolved, until everybody has access to clean water and sanitation, I will not go to the bathroom.
What?
I'm not going to go to the bathroom.
Whoa.
Yeah, go ahead.
Do you mean literally? Like, you won't go to the bathroom, but you'll go somewhere else? Like, maybe a swimming pool?
You're the reporter. You do the math.
I don't know what that means.
I just have a quick follow-up here.
Yeah, go ahead.
What?
No, still no. You?
Are we calling this one Matt Damon, no cup?
Oh, please don't do that.
It's already done.
Is that your real hair? What does that have to do with anything?
Refuses to answer questions.
No. Oh, yes, fine, all right. It's my real hair.
Lashes out at Black Reporter.
Come on, guys. You know what I'm talking about. Guys, come on. Guys, the toilet strike, it's important, all right? Who's with me? Come on.
Matt, look, if you're saying by this strike you will not be excreting waste from your body, does that mean both caca and pee-pee? Because just caca, I'm totally with you.
Look, I implore everybody in this room, please, everybody here today, everybody watching at home, to just join me, say no to toilets, say yes to clean water and sanitation for all. Okay? That's it. Thanks, everybody. Reporters are dicks.
Hey, we heard that.
No, I meant other different.
Follow-up, which one?
Support Matt's strike. Go to strikewithme.org.
Whose idea?
It was, yeah, that's a good question. It really kind of started with a conversation that Matt and I had with some of the other water.org staff, because we'd done a lot of kind of PSA type videos, and they've got 10,000, 50, I think our highest was like 70,000 views, and just talking around the table about what Matt clearly feels are his greatest strengths are being able to tell a story and to connect with audiences. And so we thought about that and thought, well, can we use humor to do that? And then we started with that concept. We have some board members who are kind of in the film industry here in LA that had some great connections. So we got Josh Lieb to do the writing for us. These guys that had done some writing for The Daily Show and Seinfeld. And they just seized on it, right? And so they brought a lot of the creativity to it as well. And then we got the Google YouTube studios that just opened here in LA recently to donate all the space for the day to get this done. And so a lot of different people contributed to kind of the concept and making it happen. And I think that the thing that is unique about it is it takes a really serious social issue, it brings celebrity to the issue, and it brings humor to the issue. And I think that's fairly unique, but it's been done before. But I think what we were able to really do with it that made it even more powerful was to bring in those distribution channels, so that we had YouTube as a natural partner, we had Yahoo as a natural partner to really help us get it out there. And then to strike this arrangement with the video bloggers. And so we put the call out to them to say, send us your best ideas and we'll pick the top ones, and you get Matt Damon to kind of work with your script, and you can do your response video. So that right there, I think between all the video bloggers that came on board, they had like 10 million subscribers. And so once you start bringing them in, you're getting a whole different demographic as well. So the whole thing, when you package it up, is I think a pretty unique approach to it. And we got some good attention from Fast Company and some other folks that kind of took it apart and looked at it how to do it. So I think it can work. It could work for other causes as well.
Yeah, well, it is a different approach, and way before these guys were even, on the map. You remember when we were younger, most of the charity's appeal was guilt, and it was a very heavy dose. Sally Struthers and Africa, and so it is a serious issue, and it requires serious leadership. But occasionally, you can get so much attention by making it a little bit lighter. So I think it's genius.
Thanks. I think it's the net of it is that there's been more than 6 million views. There's been tens of thousands of people that have taken some kind of action by donating their voice through their Twitter feed, by their Facebook status, lending it to us for World Water Day. And donations. I mean, we've had over $100,000 in donations generated from that. But as you can tell, it wasn't a really in-your-face kind of a pitch for funds. It was really more, how do we begin to build this movement around water and sanitation and elevate it as a cause so that we can really solve the problem.
No, it's a great approach. And again, sort of thinking non-traditionally, the traditional model was sort of the hard plea with a really in-your-face example of the problem. Applying that same philosophy and new perspective is, how did you change the traditional charity approach from raising money, plea only, grants? That's a tough life to chase, money all the time. So let's talk about how water.org has shifted that traditional beneficiary as poor soul versus how you look at them, which is now customers, paying customers, valuable customers that repay their loans.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I mean, kind of going back to some of the earlier part of the conversation this evening, the fact that the poor are spending so much money on water, and it's very inefficient in terms of how they secure their water. So what if we could kind of reimagine this whole global water crisis not as having 2.5 billion people in need of charity for water and sanitation, but as potential customers who have intrinsic power as a customer to make choices to get the kind of water solutions that they desire. But the fact is that they were cut off from something that any kind of thriving economy takes completely for granted, and that was access to credit, to finance. And the microfinance institutions would not loan for water and sanitation loans because they didn't see how the dots could be connected to getting that loan and then generating income to repay the loan. So we helped them discover this opportunity cost of all the time that people spent scavenging water, sometimes up to 6 hours a day, the money that they were spending on water vendors. And so we then brought them into the space of water and sanitation by taking on risk for them. So we basically gave them startup capital, smart subsidies, so that they could start loan portfolios that focused on water and sanitation. So we were helping share that risk with them. And then what they did, they started making the loans, and they would source commercial capital for that, and which now we've used about $6 million in philanthropic capital to date, a little more than that, to then leverage about $15 million in commercial capital. So that's 15 million charity dollars that don't need to be raised in order to get poor people access to water. The loans are now being repaid at more than 98%, and we've reached over 600,000 people with water and or sanitation through the loan model as opposed to straight charity. So that really is the essence of the innovation, is that it's one thing to kind of have an hypothesis about, okay, the poor can be customers. It's another thing then to go out and design an intervention where you can really test that and scale that. And that's what we've done, and now we hope that can expand even more and ripple out into other organizations taking it up.
And break down one transaction for us. What does it mean for a person to get access to this credit, and what do they buy, and how much is it?
Sure. So imagine that you're like in the slums of Hyderabad. You're a poor woman. You're spending, you get up in the morning to go collect water. You go to the public stand post that might be 20, 30-minute walk away. You get there, you wait in line for an hour, and then the stand post runs out of water. Or then you have to go over to the tanker truck that might be roaming the neighborhood selling water, again, waiting in line, don't get it. So then you end up going to the ditch, right, and collecting the water. So every day is this repeat of water insecurity. You don't know where your water is going to come from, so you have to put all this time towards it. So if you can get a water connection at your home, then you'll have that security that there's going to be water there when you need it. And so you take out a loan for about $100 in most cases, so that you can pay the water utility to connect to it. And then you pay a monthly user fee that's much less than what you would be paying the water vendors. And then because you have this time on your hands, you then can work at a paying job, generate the income that you need to repay the loan. And so that's the typical kind of way the transaction works. People also take out loans for toilets. And again, for women in particular, the amount of time they spend trying to find a place where they have enough privacy to defecate and the fact that many of them have to wait until nightfall to go out and defecate along the riverbank or the railroad tracks. There's a lot of dignity loss associated with that, security loss that you have. And people will also find the income, find the resources that they need to take out a loan to build a toilet because they value that so much.
What is that loan? $100 for a toilet?
So the toilet is usually a little bit more. Sometimes it's up to $150. It depends because this is really driven by the individuals. Some individuals just want a simple pit latrine toilet and it can be very cheap. Others want to build like a bathing area adjacent to it so that they can bathe in private as well. And so that's the whole concept really of turning this on its head, because as beneficiaries you kind of get whatever the NGO is bringing to your village. And with this approach, you really are the one making the decision to take out that loan. What's the particular water solution, the toilets that's going to work best for you?
You've gone from the beneficiary to a customer who can have choices and not just sort of get whatever you're dealt or nothing. And it does change the model in a big way, and it leverages the amount of money that you and the amount of families that you can impact. Amanda, can you queue up and play the video of water credit in India?
It's rolling, so just start talking whenever you want.
Okay, I'm here with Gary. We are in Trichy, India. Gary, why do you have a bindi on your forehead?
Matt, why do you have a bindi on your forehead?
I don't know. I just woke up that way. So what have we learned?
Well, I think what I've learned here, I mean, every day I learn something new, is that this incredible toll it's taken on people with these money lenders. I mean, we just talked to a woman who was paying 200% interest for a loan for the money lenders. And so what they're able to do with the water credit loans is get a much more affordable rate to get that loan so that they can get the water connection at their home.
Great. And the other thing I think that is really arresting is how much their lives change as a result of these loans. And women who are going to neighboring slums in the middle of the night on water collections and either losing sleep or being late for their jobs and losing money, and so their lives are really really benefit from these loans.
Here in the slums, you can see that people really, their economic potential is all pent up here because they spend so much time just trying to secure water. So if we can get them that little bit of a loan to get that water connection so they're not scavenging for water all the time, then they can go out and make 5 or 10 times more than what they have to pay for their loan with that extra time.
Also, in terms of empowering women, a number of them talked about the dynamic in their household changing because they were no longer relying on their husbands for money. They were independent, and they could go out and with these self-help groups they could earn money on their own, and that's changed the dynamics in the household a bit. My job is I am an actor.
How are you?
We're good, and our day got a lot brighter when we came here to sit here. Well, look at all the kids we saw in the school, and the teachers saying that they have a 99% attendance rate now. That's obviously a huge improvement because of some of these programs, and those are the exact things that are gonna pay off. I mean, we'll come back to this village and to other villages like it, and you'll see and just an absolute difference in the quality of people's lives as these programs start scaling up.
Anybody from class think there's someone we might want to introduce them to? Maybe someone who's visited recently, who's an expert in food science and nutrition in India? Anybody? Yes, your speaker from last week. We'll make that connection. It'll be a good fit.
Great. Well, one thing I wanted to point out, because you were talking about both the challenges of fundraising as well as innovation in the program and in water credit, and I think that what we've discovered is that long, hard slog of trying to raise funds was very challenging because there were points of differentiation between us and other organizations in terms of the best practices that we were trying to employ and making sure projects were sustainable. But this whole sector that has evolved in a way that's kind of the norm now. And so what we were able to do with water credit was to develop this additional point of differentiation, because when we, for instance, we have an $8 million grant from the PepsiCo Foundation now that's there to help us reach about 800,000 people in India with water, with safe water. And one of the things that really captured their imagination was what we've been looking at, and that's the philanthropic cost per person reached. And it's different than the total cost, because the total cost can still be more than $100 to get somebody a water connection. But the more that you can displace that from having to be 100% charity and leverage commercial capital, the costs come down. So we had an initial program with Pepsi where it was about $50 that it was costing us to get water to a person. With water credit, that started to come down, and we had the initial grant with them where we were going to get to $24 of philanthropic costs per person, and we actually beat that. Now the second grant, we've got it down to $10 of philanthropic costs. So when you look at that from a foundation's perspective, particularly a business foundation that's looking at how do we get the maximum bang for the buck in terms of the philanthropic capital that we invest, then all of a sudden it starts becoming much more attractive, which helped us with landing a MasterCard grant and then Caterpillar. And so these are the things that as you're innovating not just to really make this more effective in the program implementation, but it's also the way that you survive and thrive in terms of the revenue model for the organization.
So like any business, a point of differentiation, higher efficiency, and particularly in your business, you have to show where the money's used most efficiently, and to be able to leverage that. And in that same video before we started playing it, it actually showed the model, charity model dollars versus water credit leveraged dollars, and it was several times difference in terms of what the number of people you could reach. I think it was 10 families versus 50 families.
Yeah, over that 5-year period.
That's quite an innovation. And wherever sustainability and not having to be on the you're still going to be on the road raising money, but when other parties can make money or be repaid their money at least on loans, it's far more sustainable than having to raise dollar for dollar every dollar. So before we go to questions from the students, I want to talk about Haiti. And so get your questions ready. We'll bring a mic out to you guys in a minute. So talk about your entrance into Haiti. And first, where my family and sister met you was at the Clinton Global Initiative. And talk about the role of CGI and your involvement in Haiti, how that came about.
So I felt that water.org it wasn't water.org at that point, actually. This was back in 2008, but Water Partners had been active in Latin America for some time, in Africa and Asia, but we'd never done anything in Haiti, and I felt like that was something we were really pulled to, and Haiti's a challenge, and so yet we felt the time was right as an organization to make a commitment to launching our work in Haiti, and we did that as part of a commitment through the Clinton Global Initiative, which was really great for us because the Clinton Global Initiative at that time was putting a lot of emphasis on Haiti. This was even before the earthquake, but after some of the floods that had happened there with the hurricanes. And so we put a stake in the ground to reach 50,000 people with Haiti, and we were fortunate. In fact, Elise Lebec, who's here with Water.org, was with the Clinton Global Initiative at that time before we hired her for Water.org, and helped us put together that commitment for Haiti. And we were also in 2009 able to use the Clinton Global Initiative as a forum to announce the merger between H264 and Water Partners to form Water.org. And that was a tremendous platform for us to be able to let people know what we were doing, and to then garner additional support and capture the attention and imagination of other donors and corporate sponsors, and including Jill, who then signed up. So.
You're between Matt Damon and President Clinton, you've got some pretty good spokespeople to help you get some visibility. You mentioned Alix, and I'll talk about the importance of your team and the people that have helped build water.org with you.
Yeah, I think that the time and effort and care that you expend on building the team can't be underestimated. Because as an organization grows, we're over 40 staff now, and of course, it's been a transformation for me as employee number one, where I did everything, to slowly evolving into understanding what my best roles can be in the organization and how do you add staff to really make sure that you get it right. Because there's so many ways as you grow an organization or a business to get it wrong, and there's a few ways to get it right. And for me, every year my appreciation grows more for how key having the right team members are on this, and to have people like Alix who can come in and just tenaciously raise the funds and bring in the large grants, or to have, we just signed on our COO yesterday, which was a great coup for us, and we spent a lot of time finding just the right COO for the organization because we had such a great one initially, and so we've been able to bring a new one on, and as we build out the team. And I think one of the lessons for me is you do have to build out ahead of the curve, and that's very scary, particularly in a nonprofit organization where it's sometimes hard to estimate the revenue streams. But I felt like every time we've kind of built out ahead, it was the right move to go do that, because it did help us to have the strength that we needed to launch or to land that next grant. And so I think as my role evolves, having the right people in place liberates me to kind of add the greatest value that I can.
Yeah, that's the the Michael Collins good to great philosophy, is get the right people on the bus even before you need them, and that's but it's always tough as an entrepreneur, particularly
I
someone.
should have gone to business school. I would have learned all this stuff much sooner.
You could write the book. You don't need to read the book. You've already lived it. But no, that's the point. It's like whenever you're in a small business or a growing business, it always takes some nerve to invest in people. Like I don't need that person yet. They're $50,000, $100,000 of overhead, but I don't want to pass them up, and so it takes some nerve to hire them even before you need them. But it pays off. It really does. Let's actually. Do we have a mic that works for the room? I want to bring up Alix for a quick question. She's the one who helped put this together and brought Gary here. So let's welcome Alix Lebec, please. Have a seat, young lady. Here's your microphone.
Thank you.
I had the privilege of meeting Alix in Haiti, and she had arranged a visit for my sister Jill and myself. You left Clinton Global Foundation or Clinton Foundation to join Water.org. Tell us why you did that. What inspired you to make that move?
Sure. And David,
Can you turn that down a touch, or just move it away? Move it away.
It's because I'm so enthusiastic to speak tonight. I think, I had worked in international development for about 10 years, including with CGI, and over that time, I just, you see the same kind of approaches, the same kind of projects, and it's hard to see results on the ground. It's hard to feel like you're having an impact because the problems are so big. And I, remember was at CGI in 2008 and saw Gary and Matt speaking at a press conference, and I was just really intrigued by this whole concept of water credit and this idea of pursuing entrepreneurial approaches that could do two really important things. One, really accelerate the progress of impact on the ground, and I couldn't emphasize that more, because particularly in a place like Haiti, you've had projects that have been ongoing for years and they're still not really the impact that you should see. And B, this whole concept of really empowering the board to participate in those solutions as active citizens and not as kind of helpless beneficiaries of just traditional aid. So those two things really resonated with me. of course, I didn't anticipate that there would be a job that would open up at water.org later down the line, but this is, it was just such a great fit for me and where I saw myself going in this particular field, and the desire to work for a really social entrepreneurial organization that was smaller and keen about having impact.
Excellent. And do you have any recent news to share, maybe?
Well, last week was a really special week for the water.org team. And before I even announce the news, I would say that finding very large-scale or significant grants for projects in water and sanitation in a place like Haiti is really hard. And it's just because water and sanitation is not the sexiest topic of all. People want to hear about creating jobs or just all the other sorts of issues that you see in a place like Haiti. And so for a while we had really tried to get different types of corporate or what we call strategic donors to get more interested in water and sanitation in Haiti. And last week we just had a new foundation that's with, and I'll say this with an American accent, but the company Cartier, who makes watches and various luxury products, launched a new foundation and just approved a $1.5 million grant for 2 of our largest water and sanitation projects in Haiti in communities for people who have not had water since 2008. And so we were really excited.
Can you say it in French?
Cartier, donc la Fondation Cartier.
She said it to me, I was like, what? She's like, Cartier. I'm like, yeah, I know that.
It's actually become kind of a running joke at water.org. People hang around just to hear Alix say it in the French accent.
One more time?
Cartier.
Cartier. Cartier. Everything sounds so much better in French. And speaking of team, we had just the great honor of meeting Alix and Laura and Neil and Roger and Mike, of course. And it was something that just, if you ever get a chance to go, and particularly with an organization like this, take it. Because one, you're going to feel like you were just won the lottery of where you're born, and that's certainly the case. And that this island, the poorest nation in the Western Hemisphere, is what, 600, 800 miles off our coast. This could be a part of the U.S. very easily. And it used to have this glorious past. Cruise ships used to stop there. It used to be this beautiful place, and it's really suffered just tragedy after natural occurrence, corruption, all these things, and then the earthquake, of course. I want to show this last clip before we open it up to your questions. And there's certainly a clip with another Matt Damon clip, but this one was done with footage that Mike recorded right next to us. So this feels like a home movie that we would have made, because I had the exact same, I was standing next to him shooting it. And it does show sort of the energy of a community when they are empowered for the first, I mean, you imagine the first time for a community to open a well and lines of children with buckets to take water home. It really is powerful. So if you can play this last one. And they had, speaking of bloggers and leveraging the internet, this brother team of the bloggers, they have millions of followers. And so it was brilliant to get them involved as well.
Good morning, John. Less than a year ago, I was in Haiti, learning about the people there and their problems and their dreams and their hopes and their frustrations. I was there with water.org because they wanted to share their work with me so that I could share it to the rest of the world through my eyes, or at least through my camera. What I found in Haiti was astounding to me. Not that these people are living in basically what we consider the hygiene of the Middle Ages, but that they are in, the important ways exactly like me and my friends and my family. They care about each other, they like to eat sweet things, they like to dance and have fun and laugh. They have very strong and complicated communities, and they want a better life for themselves and for their children. I spent some time there in a village called Savantapak, where the citizens of that village had asked one of water.org's partner organizations to come in and help them build a well. Their water source at the time was about a 20-minute walk away from the village, and it was a muddy hole in the ground, really. So when I came back, I told you all about these people, and I asked you to donate money to water.org. We all worked together, and we gave those people something that they need. And now, boats in Gluluno and Olna and Jean-Baptiste and Isaid and Jenna, they now have a well. Thanks to Nerdfighteria and Water.org, those people have more than just a well. They have a community-owned asset that people pay a fair price to use, and that money goes into maintaining that asset so that 20, 30, 50 years from now, those people still have a source of clean water. They've built something that the community's invested in, has control over, and cooperatively maintains. And now because of this resource, they have more time to grow their economy, to educate themselves and their children, because they can spend less time going to get water and less time being sick. When I was there, Jenna, one of the youngest members of the well committee, spoke out and said that there just has to be a better way. She was just frustrated. And now she has that better way. She also remembered me, which was nice, and she was asking where I was. Which is sad. Please consider donating to water.org. They do it well and they do it right. And of course, go to projectforawesome.com and vote for water.org so that they can get a piece of the Project for Awesome fund. Thank you to everyone who gave from the depth of my heart. This was just like one of the most amazing and just touching and inspiring things that I've ever been a part of. So thank you all so much for that. John, I'll see you on the live stream.